And that's why it's a bit hard to remember things, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because you nearly died, didn't you?
Some disappearances are loud, others slip through history like a shadow, leaving only questions behind. Jan Michael Vincent was once a promise, one of the brightest faces of American cinema, a rising talent who seemed destined for a long and restless career. And then, almost without warning, he vanished from Hollywood's center. Was it choice? Was it circumstance? Or was it something the industry never understood until it was too late? His climb was fast, his fall faster, and for decades, silence filled the space he left behind. Today we revisit the crossroads, the pressures, the fractures, and the final reveals that explain why he stepped away. The meteoric rise. Jan Michael Vincent did not arrive in Hollywood quietly. From early roles in The Mechanic and Big Wednesday, he carried a rare, camera-quiet charisma, an ease that made producers believe he could be the next American leading man. Directors spoke about his presence as if it were instinct rather than craft, something raw that only needed the right story to ignite. In those first years, the industry looked at Vincent and saw inevitability. What set Vincent apart was how effortlessly he held the frame. While many young actors tried to command attention, he did the opposite. He allowed scenes to settle around him. One filmmaker said, "Jan did not push a moment, he let the moment come to him," a reflection of the natural gravity he brought to early performances.
Tommy, I'm gonna get us a goddamn army!
That gravity made him ideal for roles balancing strength and vulnerability. In Big Wednesday, he captured a young man caught between freedom and responsibility, and his quiet conflict gave the film its emotional center. Vincent did not rely on dramatic flourishes. He spoke through stillness, offering a sincerity that resonated with audiences looking for authenticity. As more producers noticed his work, Vincent's reputation grew quickly. Hollywood began positioning him as a potential marquee name, someone who could merge classic leading man presence with a softer, introspective edge. His appeal rested in understatement. He suggested more than he expressed, a quality that felt refreshing in a decade full of louder performances.
4.8 inches. Pull.
Industry insiders later remarked that his ascent felt natural. One producer recalled, "He had the kind of spark the camera trusted instantly," summarizing the confidence many placed in him. But in Hollywood, fast rises create long shadows, and the ease that carried Vincent upward would soon be tested by pressures far more complicated than talent alone could solve. Airwolf and the weight of fame. When Airwolf premiered, Vincent became a household name almost overnight. The role of Stringfellow Hawk made him one of the highest-paid actors on television, and with that spotlight came an unforgiving pressure. Hollywood expected consistency. Audiences expected myth. The studio expected ratings. Behind the scenes, that pressure was beginning to carve cracks into the image he had built. The show's success was immediate, but the demands attached to it grew just as quickly. Airwolf was built around Vincent's intensity, his quiet, brooding presence, and the sense that Hawk carried a history no script could fully explain. One crew member said, "Jan gave the character a depth the writers never had to spell out, capturing how much of the show's emotional weight rested on his shoulders."
We'll be kicking their butts. Hey, they'll be chasing that smoke all over the sky.
But the attention placed him under a microscope. Weekly television was relentless. Long hours, constant revisions, and the pressure to deliver without faltering. For someone who thrived on calm, the non-stop churn of production wore him down. Small struggles suddenly felt magnified. The more famous he became, the less room he had for missteps. Rumors circulated about behind-the-scenes tension, insurance concerns, and rising nerves among producers. Still, Vincent kept showing up, delivering performances that anchored each episode. A director later recalled, "He brought Hawk a humanity that balanced all the machinery around him."
Airwolf, Hawk!
That's my brother. That's St. John.
I'm here to find out about St. John Hop.
A reminder that his talent remained undeniable even as the pressure intensified. Yet fame built on constant strain cannot hold forever. Airwolf made Vincent iconic, but it also cornered him inside expectations that grew heavier each season. The role that elevated him was becoming the same force, pushing him toward a breaking point. Shadows behind the camera. Even at his professional peak, those close to Vincent noticed a different story unfolding. There were rumors of personal struggles, inconsistent behavior, and a growing distance from the industry's demands. Hollywood rarely offers room for fragility, and Vincent found himself fighting storms he tried to keep off camera. Storms that the industry, even at its most generous, does not easily forgive. These shifts were subtle at first: missed conversations, long pauses between takes, a heaviness that did not match the confident presence he showed on screen. One colleague later said, "You could feel something weighing on him, even when he tried to hide it," pointing to the internal battles he carried quietly. As his fame grew, so did the pressure to appear unshakable. But the more he tried to protect his privacy, the more speculation filled the gaps. Hollywood is a place that thrives on certainty, scheduling, and predictability, none of which aligned with Vincent's growing struggle to stay centered. He was still talented, still compelling, but increasingly difficult for studios to ensure or manage. Stories began circulating through production offices. Delays, concerns about consistency. Executives who once saw him as a rising star now approached his name with caution. One insider said, "The industry can handle trouble, but it panics at uncertainty," summarizing why his reputation began shifting so sharply. What emerged was a contrast that defined the next phase of his life. A man capable of magnetic performances and a man wrestling with private battles no camera could capture. Those shadows, once faint, were now unavoidable, and they were beginning to shape his entire career. The industry turns away. Hollywood likes a comeback, but only when it can control the terms. As Vincent's challenges grew, studios hesitated. Insurance companies refused to sign off. Productions backed out. For an actor whose talent relied on presence and composure, these breaks were devastating. Slowly, roles disappeared. Offers dried up. The machine moved on without him, and the silence became part of the story. Once an actor becomes difficult to insure, the industry's response is swift and merciless. Studios that once praised Vincent's magnetism now weighed risk over talent. One producer later explained, "It was not about punishment, it was about fear of the unknown, capturing the cold calculus behind the casting decisions." Hollywood often presents itself as forgiving, but its forgiveness has limits. Even smaller productions grew hesitant. Directors admired him, but they needed guarantees he could show up, deliver, and withstand the grind. The unpredictability surrounding him made that promise difficult. Projects he had verbally committed to slipped away. Scripts once written with him in mind were quietly reassigned. The shift was not personal, it was structural. The very traits that made Vincent compelling on screen, his quiet intensity and inward focus, became liabilities when surrounded by logistical demands. Hollywood thrives on momentum, and his had slowed to a crawl. Once the machine senses hesitation, it replaces rather than rehabilitates. One casting agent said, "The industry moves forward like a tide. You either keep pace or it washes past you." A statement that described Vincent's position with painful accuracy. By the time his reputation stabilized, the system had already moved on. The work that once found him effortlessly now bypassed him entirely, leaving him standing outside the machine he once powered. Retreat into privacy. With the industry shifting and his personal life marked by hardship, Vincent stepped away. Not dramatically, not with a final interview or grand announcement, just quiet disappearance. He returned to a life where the cameras no longer followed, where the scripts stopped arriving, and where he could live without the weight of expectations. For someone who had once been everywhere, he became almost impossible to find. His retreat was not so much an exit as a release. Years of pressure, scrutiny, and instability had worn him down, and the quiet offered something fame never could: stillness. One friend later said, "He did not need applause anymore, he needed peace," a sentiment that captured why he did not fight his fading visibility. Away from the spotlight, Vincent lived without the rhythm of call sheets or studio demands. There were no more helicopter chases, no more rigid production schedules, just the slow pace of everyday life. He spent time reconnecting with familiar places, grounding himself in routines that asked nothing of him. For a man who had once embodied Hollywood intensity, the simplicity became a sanctuary. Still, his absence fueled speculation. People wondered whether he was preparing a comeback, healing, or hiding. But the truth was quieter than the rumors. He was simply done performing for a world that no longer felt like his. An industry insider later remarked, "Some actors chase the spotlight forever. Jan let it go," capturing the unusual finality of his departure. In privacy, he found a version of himself untouched by expectation. No scripts, no producers, no myth. Just space, time, and the kind of quiet most people never truly reach. And that quiet world, far from Hollywood's noise, became the only place where he could finally breathe. The final answers. Years later, interviews and reports began revealing the truth behind his exit: health battles, financial struggles, and the long-term effects of choices made under pressure. Vincent eventually spoke, briefly and bluntly, about the toll everything had taken. His departure from Hollywood was not a mystery at all. It was simply the ending of a story written by fame, fragility, and the unforgiving rhythms of the industry he once ruled. When he did open up, there was no attempt to reshape the past or reclaim a lost narrative. His reflections were straightforward, stripped of vanity. One journalist who interviewed him said he was not interested in excuses, only in honesty, capturing the quiet resolve that marked his later years. Vincent seemed to view the rise and the fall with the same calm detachment, as if both phases had been inevitable. The truth was that the pressures of fame collided with personal battles that few understood. Choices made under strain accumulated into consequences he carried for the rest of his life. Yet there was no bitterness in his tone when he spoke about Hollywood. Instead, there was a kind of resignation, a recognition that some stories are simply meant to change course. Those who knew him in his final years often described him as reflective, even gentle. An old friend remarked, he found a kind of acceptance most people spend their whole lives chasing, suggesting that the silence he lived in was not emptiness, but clarity. In the end, the answers were never dramatic. They were human, shaped by pressure, weakened by struggle, and finally softened by understanding. His exit was not a mystery. It was a man stepping out of a story that had taken more than it ever returned. In the end, Jan Michael Vincent's story is not simply about a career lost or a star who faded. It is about the fragile tension between talent and pressure, and how even the brightest momentum can fracture under forces no audience ever sees. His rise showed what charisma can build. His fall revealed what the human heart can only carry for so long. And his quiet retreat reminded us that fame, for all its power, cannot compete with the simple need for peace. What remains is not the spectacle of his departure, but the depth of his presence, on screen, in memory, and in the complicated legacy he left behind. Share your thoughts below, and if you want more stories that explore the lives behind the legends, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe.